At my own dinner table, my father spat venom across the plates. "You and your kid are nothing but leeches sucking this family dry." My mother smiled, nodding like she had been waiting for that moment all her life. The sick joke. They were eating food from my kitchen, sitting in the house I paid for. I didn't cry, I didn't flinch. I stared back and said, "You have 24 hours to leave." The silence was deafening. But what they didn't know was that I'd been preparing for this reckoning long before that night. I should probably tell you this. My family never looked broken from the outside. We were the kind of family that smiled too wide in Christmas photos, the kind that neighbors thought had it all together. My mom baked pies for church raffles. My dad shook hands like a politician at barbecues. And my brother, my brother, he was the golden child. Every story circled back to Knox, his big vision, his next project. Meanwhile, I was the quiet one, the fallback plan, the one expected to hold the seams together when the fabric tore. That night at dinner didn't happen in a vacuum. It was years in the making, stitched together from 1,000 little cuts. I remember being a kid, standing barefoot on the cold tile of our kitchen floor, listening to my mom hum while she stirred a pot of chili. She smelled like cinnamon and laundry soap. She looked so ordinary, but she carried this unspoken rule in every glance: don't cause waves, don't question, family first. Even if it meant family came before yourself, that rule became my cage. By the time I was 16, I already knew where I stood. Knox could wreck a car and Dad would say, "Boys will be boys." I got an A- in physics, and Mom's only comment was, "Don't be so hard on yourself, Nova. Not everyone can shine like Knox." I used to lie awake in my bedroom staring at glow-in-the-dark stars I stuck on the ceiling, wondering if anyone even noticed me beyond what I could give up for them. Fast forward. 10 years later, I had a son of my own, Asher, my anchor, my proof that life could be more than disappointment. He's 12 now, smart kind, still innocent enough to believe in people. I made a silent vow the night he was born, swaddled in hospital white, gripping my finger with that tiny hand. I would never let him feel invisible. Maybe that's why the dinner hit me so hard. He was upstairs, probably pressing his ear to the floor, listening to his grandfather tear me apart, hearing his grandmother's silence cut just as deep. What kind of legacy was I passing down if I let that poison slip into him too? The house they insulted me in, that was mine. I worked for it. Long nights in the office code reviews that stretched into sunrise back-to-back meetings where I had to prove twice as much just to be taken seriously. I built every brick of that home on sacrifices no one in my family even asked about. Yet they sat there, forks scraping porcelain, sipping wine from glasses I bought as if my blood and sweat were their entitlement. And the thing is, it wasn't the first time. The phone calls came in waves. "Can you help us with rent this month? Your father's truck broke down again. Knox just needs a little seed money. He's this close to a breakthrough." At first, I told myself it was temporary, a phase, family helping family. But temporary turned into routine. Routine turned into obligation, and obligation turned into chains. I learned to recognize the tone in Mom's voice when she called. Tight, rehearsed, like she'd practiced her lines before dialing. Dad never asked, he demanded. Knox, of course, was always too busy to ask directly. He let them do the dirty work while he pitched investors on the same half-baked dream he'd been recycling since college. But I said yes, over and over, because saying no made me feel like the selfish one. And every time I told myself this is the last time, it never was. That's the setup you need to know. By the time you see someone like me look her father in the eye and tell him he has 24 hours to leave, understand it's not a single moment of courage. It's the weight of years pressing down until something finally snaps. And what snapped wasn't my temper, it was my patience. The breaking point didn't come all at once. It crept in like a draft under a locked door. You don't notice it at first, but eventually the chill spreads everywhere. It started with a phone call. My mom's name flashed on my screen just as I was shutting down my laptop at the office. For a moment, I hesitated. Calls from her never meant good news. Still, I answered, holding on to that tiny shred of hope that maybe this time it would just be a normal check-in. Her voice was trembling, but I knew the rhythm. I'd heard it 100 times. The performance of a woman rehearsing her lines. "Nova," she said, "your father. He needs surgery. They say his heart might give out if we don't act soon. And the house, well, it's bad. We're behind. 300,000. The bank is threatening foreclosure." I pressed my fingers against the window pane of my office, watching the city blur into lights. I wanted to believe her, but I'd been here before. Big numbers, vague details, and always the same ask, "Help us." "I'll host dinner," I said finally. "Bring Dad, bring Knox, we'll talk, all of us." The silence on her end lasted a beat too long, like she hadn't expected me to demand face-to-face, but she agreed. That night, after Asher was asleep, I sat at my kitchen table and scribbled rules onto a sticky note documentation. No attacks on my kid. No cash. End the meeting if needed. I tucked the note under my plate like a talisman. Still doubt gnawed at me. I called Tessa, my friend, who had walked me through every storm since college. We met at a coffee shop on 6th Street, our usual booth by the window. She was already spinning a pencil between her fingers when I arrived. "They're lying," she said flatly after I spilled the details. "Maybe not," I argued weakly. "Nova, come on, no paperwork, no numbers, no hospital bills. They want handouts. You can't bleed for people who'd let you drain out." Her words burned because I knew they were true. She leaned closer, her voice low. "Record the dinner. Texas is one-party consent. If this turns ugly, you'll have proof. Don't let them twist your story again." I knotted my stomach tight and promised myself I'd follow her advice. The next day dragged. My nerves were raw, every clock tick louder than the last. When the evening came, I set the table with surgeon-like precision. 4 plates, 4 glasses. The napkins folded square. The pool outside shimmered under the porch light, still as glass, as if holding its breath. Asher sat on the couch with his homework spread out like a shield. I bent down and brushed a strand of hair from his forehead. "Tonight's a grown-up night," I told him. "You'll stay with Harper. No arguments." He rolled his eyes but nodded, used to these sudden arrangements. When the knock finally came, it landed like a stone in my chest. My mom walked in first, arms full of barbecue like this was some casual potluck. Dad shuffled behind, smaller than I remembered, but his eyes still carried that steel edge. Knox sauntered in, last phone, buzzing in his hand, a smirk tugging at his lips like he already knew he'd win. We sat. For a few moments, my mom filled the silence with nostalgia, talking about old birthdays, old neighbors, her potato salad recipe. But I wasn't fooled. It was the same tactic she'd always used, soften the edges before the blade. I cut her off. "Let's see the paperwork, the hospital bills, the letters from the bank. Show me what we're dealing with." Her smile faltered. My dad's eyes darted. Knox cleared his throat, shifting in his seat. "There isn't paperwork," my mom said. Finally, her voice tight. "You'll just have to trust us." Trust. That word landed like a slap, because trust was the weapon they'd used all my life. Trust us when we spent your college fund. Trust us when Knox's startup collapsed. Trust us when you worked 2 jobs to cover the bills. Knox jumped in, pitching his latest project with the enthusiasm of a snake oil salesman. "It's going to change the world, Nova. Augmented reality. You're in tech, you get it. We just need a little help to get it off the ground." I stared at him, my jaw tight. He'd used my own career against me, like dangling a carrot he knew I'd never want to chase. And then my father broke. He slammed his hand on the table, rattling the silverware. "You make $350 a year, Nova. How can you sit there and watch your family drown?" My mother's voice was softer but more cutting. "Asher's a wilder, too. Don't you want him to know where he comes from?" That was the line that nearly did me in, dragging my son into their debt, their manipulation, their endless hunger. My hands shook under the table, but my voice came out calm, almost too calm. "No, I will not mortgage my son's future to clean up your mistakes. Not again." Knox scoffed, his face twisting. "You're just playing the victim. You got lucky, that's all. Some of us have vision. Some of us just scrape by." The room blurred around me. My mother's eyes hardened, my father's fists clenched. Their voices rose in a chorus of accusation, shame, guilt, and then Knox slipped. His words tumbled out faster than his brain could catch them. The debt? Most of it's mine. Mom and Dad just backed me up. The air went still, my mother's face drained of color. My father looked away. And in that moment, I knew this wasn't about a house or surgery. It was about Knox. It had always been about Knox. My mother's eyes flashed with something dangerous. "If you don't help, I'll go public," she hissed. "I'll tell everyone what kind of daughter you are. I'll drag Asher into it if I have to." The threat cut through me like ice. She was willing to weaponize my child. That's when something inside me clicked into place. Cold, clear, final. "You have 24 hours, I said again, steady as stone. The silence that followed was heavier than any scream, and in that silence I understood this wasn't just a family dispute anymore. This was war. After they stormed out that night, the house was too quiet. Not peaceful hollow. I could hear the faint hum of the refrigerator, the tick of the kitchen clock, but it all felt sharp like background noise cutting through my chest. I stacked their untouched plates into the sink one by one. Each clink of porcelain against steel was a reminder of how much of myself I had wasted trying to keep this family afloat. I should have felt relief, but instead I felt something heavier, grief. Not for them, for the illusion. Upstairs, Asher's room light was still glowing. He had come home from Harper's just before they left. He sat on his bed cross-legged doodling rockets in his notebook. When I stepped in, he didn't even look up. "Did they leave?" he asked quietly. "Yes," I said. For good, I paused. "We'll see." He didn't answer, just kept sketching. A crude rocket ship with flames shooting from the base. I kissed the top of his head, forcing my voice steady. "You don't have to worry. I've got us." But I knew those words were just as much for me as they were for him. The next morning, my phone buzzed nonstop. Not calls, notifications. My stomach sank when I saw it. TikTok. My mother in full performance mode, her tears streaking perfectly down her face. She sobbed into her camera about the cold-hearted daughter who had abandoned her parents in their hour of need. She flashed photos of me and Asher in front of our West Austin home, framed like evidence of my selfishness. The hashtags were merciless, were ungrateful, daughter, family, traitor, heartless. I scrolled through comments until my hands shook. Strangers dissected me like they knew me. Some pitied my parents, others tore me apart. How can she do that to her own blood? Poor Dad, imagine being thrown out by your daughter. That boy deserves better. That boy. Asher. My chest clenched. If she dragged him into this circus, he'd be humiliated at school before he even knew what betrayal was supposed to mean. By lunchtime, the video had crossed 100,000 views. By dinner, 500,000. My coworkers glanced at me sideways in the office, whispers trailing behind me like shadows. My manager called me in his voice, gentle but prying. "Is everything okay at home, Nova? Do we need to be aware of complications?" I smiled tight. Lied, said it was under control. Inside, I was burning. Tessa didn't wait for me to call. She pulled me into our corner booth at the cafe, her laptop already open. Save everything, she instructed. Screenshots, links, timestamps. This isn't just drama anymore, it's defamation. Her voice was low but fierce. They want a war on your reputation. Fine, then you fight it with paperwork. So I did. I gathered every piece of evidence, her video, the comments, the emails that would soon follow. By the end of the night, I had a digital folder labeled case. It felt cold mechanical, but it also felt like armor. The following days blurred. My father sent texts begging for just a little bridge loan. Knox released his own videos spinning the story into a narrative where I had sabotaged his dreams for years. My mother escalated with more crocodile tears, hinting about my divorce, about Asher's broken family. But in the middle of the storm, Marin called, my real estate lawyer. Her voice was steady calm in the chaos. "There's a provision in your parents' mortgage," she said. 2 years ago, they refinanced. It's in default. The bank can sell to any qualified buyer without their consent. If you want the house out of their hands, Nova, now's your chance. For the first time in weeks, I felt oxygen in my lungs, a way out, not just defensive fence. The decision came quickly. I gathered financials, authorized Marin to move forward. Within days, the sale was underway. The East Austin house, the same house where my college fund had vanished into Knox's pipe dream, was about to become mine. It wasn't just real estate. It was a message. When the papers cleared, Marin drafted official notices my parents and Knox had 24 hours to vacate or face legal consequences. She also sent a cease and desist letter to my mother over the TikTok videos. Knox responded with rage, his texts full of insults calling me a traitor. My father tried bargaining, offering partial repayments he couldn't possibly deliver. My mother doubled down online, her followers egging her on. But their noise no longer pierced the way it used to. I hired a cleaning crew, changed the locks, and walked through the East Austin house like a surgeon dissecting an old wound. The air smelled of dust and regret. In the attic, they found a battered box tucked beneath Christmas ornaments and broken tools. Inside, my grandfather's original will. Bank statements. A letter addressed to me. My breath caught as I unfolded the letter. His handwriting was shaky, but clear. The money is for Nova's education. No one else's dream. No one else's debts. Tears blurred the page. Proof. Validation after years of being painted as the selfish one. I added it to the file. My arsenal grew. Meanwhile, Asher tried to keep up his normal life basketball practice science projects, his telescope pointed at the stars. But he heard the whispers at school. He asked me one night, "Why does Grandma hate us?" My throat tightened. "She doesn't hate you," I said carefully. "She just made choices that hurt us. And when people are hurting, sometimes they try to drag others down with them." He nodded slowly, too wise for 12. Then he went back to sketching rockets, his pencil scratching the paper like it could erase the weight in the room. That night, I sat alone on the back porch, staring at the pool's glassy surface. I thought about every sacrifice I had made, every boundary I had swallowed, and I realized I was done playing defense. My mother wanted to control the story. My brother wanted to rewrite it. My father wanted to guilt me into silence, but I finally had the one thing they couldn't twist the truth, written in ink, signed by the man who had believed in me more than anyone else. The next time they came home, I would be ready. Not with open arms, with paperwork, with proof, with the weight of every silent wound turned into steel. This time, the reckoning would be mine to deliver. Airports are strange places for endings. People think of them as beginnings, honeymoons, new jobs, homecomings, but for me, the Austin terminal became a courtroom without walls. Their flight home landed late afternoon. I stood just beyond the security rope, Marin beside me, a folder, tucked neatly under her arm. The smell of fried food and jet fuel filled the air. A TV above the gate blared muted news, but all I heard was the thud of my pulse. First came Knox striding off the plane like a man returning from victory, his phone already in hand, his lips twitching in some half-smirk. Behind him, my mom clutched a travel pillow, her face arranged in a performance of weariness. She must have practiced the entire flight. My dad followed last, moving slower now, but his eyes searching, calculating. They spotted me at once. My mother's face lit up, but not with love, with the satisfaction of someone about to twist the knife. She stepped forward. "Nova, thank God you're here. We knew you'd come around." I didn't move. Marin stepped ahead, calm and precise, and handed over 3 crisp envelopes. "Consider yourselves served." Confusion washed over their faces. Knox tore his open first, his eyes scanning the words until the blood drained from his face. He looked up, voice sharp, cracking the fragile calm of the terminal. "You bought the house." "Yes," I said, my voice steady. "It's mine now. Legally, you have no claim. And if you don't vacate by the deadline, the sheriff will enforce it." My father's jaw clenched. My mother blinked, stunned. Travelers slowed around us, curious. A little boy tugged his mother's sleeve and whispered, "What's happening?" Knox's volume rose, desperate to seize control of the narrative. "You're a thief. You've been against me since day one, always jealous, always trying to sabotage me." I stepped closer, my voice low but sharp enough to cut. "You mean since you stole my college fund? Since you promised the world and left me sleeping on floors while you played visionary?" Gasps rippled from strangers nearby, though they didn't know the details. They could feel the weight. Knox tried to hold my gaze, but his eyes darted. My mother jumped in, her voice trembling just enough to sound authentic. "We did it for the family, Nova. For you. You've become so cold. Can't you see we only wanted to survive?" I pulled a folded letter from my bag, the one my grandfather had written me. I held it up, the paper, yellowed but unshaken in my hand. "This was never yours to spend. He left it for me, for my education. And you twisted his trust into your excuse." For once, her tears froze before they could fall. My dad stepped forward, his voice booming, trying to reassert his authority. "That's enough. You don't humiliate your family in public." I squared my shoulders. "You did that yourselves. Every lie, every debt, every threat to drag my son into your mess. That ends today." Something broke in his eyes, then not remorse. Not yet, but fear. Fear of the one thing they had never expected my refusal to bend. Marin spoke again, her tone professional, unshaken. "You've been notified. Further contact outside of legal channels will be considered harassment. Violating the order will result in immediate escalation." A circle had formed around us, now strangers pretending not to watch while openly listening, phones discreetly angled, recording. The humiliation they had once used against me was now theirs to carry. Knox exploded, his voice raw. "You'll regret this. You think you're better than us because you got lucky you'll be nothing without family." I stepped in close enough that only he could hear. "I already am better because I chose not to become you." His face twisted, fury flashing, but his hands stayed at his sides. He wasn't brave enough to risk the cameras. My mother finally tried one last angle, her voice breaking. "Please, Nova, don't do this. We'll lose everything." I met her gaze, and for the first time I felt nothing. Not anger, not pity, just freedom. "So did I. When you took it from me at 18, now it's your turn to live with the cost." The silence that followed was the kind that cracks the ground open. My father's shoulders sagged. My mother's face collapsed in on itself. Knox stood trembling, his mask shattered. Security approached, alerted by the raised voices. Marin stepped forward, explaining, handing over documents with practiced efficiency. The officers nodded their presence, sealing the confrontation like a gavel strike. As they were escorted toward baggage claim, my mother twisted back eyes, searching mine for any last flicker of weakness. There was none. I stood rooted, my hands steady, my breathing even. For the first time, the weight wasn't on me, it was on them. When the crowd finally dispersed, I sank onto a bench, my body shaking from the adrenaline. Marin sat beside me, her hand light on my shoulder. "You did it," she said simply. But I knew it wasn't over yet. Public battles have aftershocks. Reputations don't die quietly. And as much as I wanted this to be the end, I could already feel the tremors of what would come next. Still, for that moment, in the buzzing chaos of the airport, I allowed myself something I hadn't felt in years: victory. Not the kind you celebrate with champagne or confetti, the kind that comes from surviving a war you never chose and realizing you finally held the power. And as I walked out into the Texas sun, my phone buzzing in my pocket, I thought of Asher, of his rockets and his quiet resilience. And I swore to myself, no matter what storm came next, I'd face it with the same steady resolve. Because now I knew I could win. The days after the airport felt strange, like stepping into a house where the furniture had been rearranged. Everything looked familiar, but the weight had shifted. For the first time in years, my phone didn't buzz with my mother's demands, Knox's pitches, or my father's booming threats. The silence was almost unnerving, but it didn't last. The fallout came quickly. My mother posted one last video. This time she wasn't crying. She wasn't even blaming me. She turned on Knox. Her words were clipped defensive, almost frantic, as she explained how he had dragged her into his schemes. She begged her followers for forgiveness, admitting she had gone too far. It should have felt like vindication, but all I felt was emptiness. When your own mother uses social media as a confessional booth, you stop craving her apologies. Knox spiraled. His videos grew erratic, the confident swagger slipping into desperation. He railed about betrayal, about how I had stolen his shot at success. But the numbers didn't lie. His startup was gone, his credibility fractured, his parents' house no longer his stage. Eventually, even his followers stopped caring. And my father. He did the one thing I never expected. He went silent. No calls, no texts. He faded out of the picture like smoke dissipating after a fire. Meanwhile, the court process unfolded. Marin guided me through each step, her calm precision, a shield. The will, the IOU, the refinance papers, they painted a story that couldn't be denied. The judge ruled in my favor, ordering the property secured and protecting me from further harassment. Financial restitution wasn't possible. The money had long been burned through, but the recognition mattered. The truth was, on record now, not just a wound I carried in silence. The East Austin house was officially mine. I hired a crew to clear it out, to sweep away decades of dust and regret. They found boxes of broken gadgets, unopened mail, faded photo albums. I kept only one thing, my grandfather's letter. Everything else I let go. Asher came with me on the last day. We stood in the yard beneath the pecan tree, its branches heavy with late summer leaves. He looked up at it, then at me. "Can we plant one at our house?" he asked. I nodded. "Yeah, this time we'll watch it grow together." Back in West Austin, we dug into the backyard soil, our hands dirty sweat dripping under the Texas sun. We planted a young pecan tree, small but sturdy. Asher checked on it every morning, convinced it would sprout overnight. I told him what my grandfather once told me. Trees and trust both take time. Life began to settle into a rhythm again. Friday taco nights returned. Homework spread across the kitchen table. Laughter replaced the tension that had haunted every family dinner. I also said yes to the journalist who reached out. I told the story not for revenge, not to humiliate, but for the people out there sitting in the same silence I had once endured. The article went live raw and unfiltered, and the response was overwhelming. Messages poured in from strangers, daughters who'd been scapegoated sons, cut off for saying no. People who thought they were alone until they read my words. It was healing in a way I hadn't expected. My pain had become proof that survival was possible. One evening, as Asher worked on a science project, Tessa and I sat on the porch, the cicadas buzzing around us. She leaned back, sipping iced tea, and said, "You know you could make this your work. Helping people like you, like your mom, tried to destroy. Turn this fight into something bigger." I thought about it. About law advocacy community work, about channeling the scars into something useful. For the first time, it felt possible. Later that night, I tucked Asher into bed. He slid a drawing under his pillow, a rocket ship aimed at Mars, flames bright, the stars scattered above. I kissed his forehead and whispered, "You're free to dream, Ash. No one will take that from you." And as I turned out the light, I realized the truest victory wasn't winning against my family. It was building one with my son, rooted in love, protected by boundaries, watered with truth. The pecan tree outside would take years to bear fruit, but it was ours, and so was the future. Family is supposed to mean safety, protection, love. But sometimes the people who share your blood are the first ones to wound you. I spent years carrying their betrayal like a second skin, convincing myself that if I just gave a little more, maybe one day they'd finally see me. They never did. And that's the truth I want you to hear. Love without respect isn't love at all. It's control. I chose peace. I chose my son. I chose to stop apologizing for protecting the life we built. And if you've ever stood in that same space, torn between your own survival and the family who should have been your shelter, know this, you're not alone. Sometimes the bravest thing you can do is draw the line and not step back. If this story reached you, if it stirred something you've carried quietly, tell me in the comments. share your story. Because when we speak, we remind each other that silence doesn't win. And if you want more stories like this, subscribe. It means more than you know.